Hi and welcome to the Running Channel. I'm Anna and today, along with Rick, we have got our stat heads on because we want to tell you what we think is loads of really interesting data all about marathon runners.
Yeah, thanks to a ton of data uploaded to Strava at the 2018 London Marathon, we can tell you how much you need to run, when you need to taper, and what your average finish time can be depending on your age.
There's loads of other stuff as well, so keep watching to make sure you find out all the stats and numbers. Firstly though, if you're new around here, please hit subscribe and tap the bell icon so you get notified when we upload new videos all about running, which we do every single week.
So when you're running a marathon, it's very easy to pluck a number out of thin air and think, that's the one I'm going to go for if you've not done one before. So what time should we be aiming for?
Well, of course, this all depends on a number of different factors, including your current fitness, your experience, how much you're going to be able to train. We're going to come on to that one later. But from this data, we found that 14,000 runners right across the London Marathon finished in an average time of 4 hours and 16 minutes for men, and women came in just under the 5 hour mark at 4 hours and 59 minutes.
So we can show you exactly how much training is required to hit your target times for both men and women. If you look at the 13 weeks building up to marathon day, there is a steady increase in mileage up until 4 weeks before, when we start to taper, and that drops off dramatically with 2 weeks to go, and we'll have more on tapering shortly. Now, it might seem really obvious, but those who put in the most weekly miles on average got the fastest times.
And as the saying goes, a marathon is hundreds of miles. The last 26.2 is just your victory lap. Because if you look at the distance that people were running across the whole of their marathon training, it ranged from 221 miles to 699 miles run just to train for the marathon. And it might seem a little obvious, but those who were running faster times, so breaking 3 hours for a marathon, well, they were running around 50 miles plus a week. And those at the other end of the table who were running in more than 5 hours, well, they were putting in about 18 to 19 miles a week.
So when were these runners putting in all those miles? Well, if you look at a table of average runs per week compared to finishing times, the top female finishers were running 9 times a week before tapering.
So tapering, how much were marathon runners cutting back in the final few weeks before race day? Well, if you look at the number of runs that they were doing, not by much at all. The faster runners were dropping by about 1 run during the week, but other than that, they were mostly staying the same. But the runs that they were doing were much shorter, because if you look at the total average mileage for the weeks, then that has dropped by around 20 to 30%.
Now let's look on average at how many runs these runners were doing in the race week itself. At the top end of the table, runners were doing 4 or 5 runs per week, and that is about half, 50% less than what they were doing before they started tapering. And let's look at those runs individually as well. The distance is also decreasing, so the amount of miles that they are putting in is also going down. If you're unsure about anything to do with tapering, check out our video on marathon tapering here on the Running Channel.
When it comes to pacing, sorry Rick, us girls, we do it better than you guys.
Yeah, we tend to go off a little too fast at the start and then we pay for it later.
And that's of course to be expected, because you've done all the training, you've tapered so your legs feel fresh, it's race day and you're ready to go, and you're going to let the crowds carry you along.
If we delve a little bit deeper into that data though, we can see that mile 3 tends to be the fastest mile versus mile 22 the slowest, when we should be running our first half pretty equal to our second. However, Anna, we know that this is not often the case, with women on average running a second half at 11% slower and men a whopping 17% slower in the second half. Older runners though, good news for them, they tend to be pretty good pacers. Age plays a part in average finishing times for marathons. That's why when you look at good for age qualifying times, the older you get, the slower qualifying times that you get. Surprisingly though, people in their 40s actually have have the fastest times.
We have the data broken down for how much training people were putting into their marathon compared to their age as well. So while there wasn't a massive spread in finish times between the 20-year-olds and the 59-year-olds, what you can see is that those who were running and were older were putting in more miles in training to achieve those times. So if you're in your 20s and 30s, there's a lot of potential there. So maybe think about doing some extra mileage. Now, it's not necessary to run all of your training runs at your planned marathon race pace. Those runners who are aiming for a quicker time will be doing more runs during the week, so they do have more of a chance to practice it, but it's really important that when you structure your training for a marathon, you do vary the pace up. And if you want some more tips on that, be sure to check out our video on how to get a marathon PB.
Now, among those runners who ran the same race 2 years on a run, those with the better times actually ran fewer training runs at marathon pace in year 2 compared to when they did it in year 1. Now, if we break that down a bit to those who ran sub 4 hours, in year 1, many of them were running their marathon pace at around 43% of their runs. But on year 2, that went down to just 25% of their training runs.
And people who improved in year 2 also tended to do more activities that weren't running.
Not running?
Not running.
Unbelievable. So there you have it, a guide to marathon times, pacing, and all the stats you could ever need. But remember, comparison is the thief of joy. So if you take anything from this, maybe you can use it to set your own benchmarks and brag to your mates about how you compare to the averages.
If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the running channel by hitting the big red circle on the screen. Oh, and while you're here, why not check out some more of our videos all about marathons?